The airport lounge buzzed with the low murmur of travelers, the clink of coffee cups, the shuffle of newspapers, the hum of phones being charged. Marcus Reed sat quietly in a leather chair near the window, his carry-on tucked neatly beside him. He was dressed plainly in a polo shirt and jeans, his posture relaxed but alert, the kind of calm that came from discipline etched over years. He wasn't flashy, he didn't draw attention. He was simply waiting for his boarding call, eyes on the tarmac where planes glided in and out like clockwork. Then, a sharp voice cut through the atmosphere. "You can't sit here." Marcus turned his head. A woman in her 50s, blonde hair perfectly styled, stood glaring down at him. She wore a crisp blouse and clutched a designer purse, her stance rigid with indignation. Around them, conversations hushed, curious eyes beginning to drift toward the commotion. "This lounge is for first-class passengers only," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "You need to move." Now Marcus blinked, his calm unbroken. "Ma'am, I have every right to be here." Karen scoffed, her lips curling into a smirk. "Don't lie to me. I've been flying first class for years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't." She crossed her arms, her voice sharp as glass. "You don't. So get up." A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A pair of college students near the coffee machine exchanged uneasy glances. The atmosphere shifted, every ear now tuned to the clash. Marcus straightened slightly, his deep voice steady. "My ticket allows me to sit here. That's all you need to know." But Karen leaned closer, her voice growing louder, almost gleeful in its hostility. "You think you can just walk into a place like this and no one will say anything? Not today. You don't belong here, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Her words rang out, heavy and public. Phones began to rise discreetly, cameras trained on the scene. Marcus's jaw tightened, though his expression stayed calm. He had faced worse: deserts, firefights, nights when survival was a question mark. Yet here, in the quiet of an airport lounge, a stranger's voice carried a sting of a different kind. He folded his hands together, his silence a shield. Because he knew something Karen didn't. The truth always finds its way out. The lounge, once filled with the low hum of travelers, had gone quiet. Every nearby conversation seemed to pause, every eye drawn to the standoff between Karen and the man who refused to be rattled. Karen seized on the silence, her voice rising like she was performing for an audience. "I don't know how you slipped in here, but this section is for paying customers. People who earned it, not freeloaders." Gasps fluttered through the room. A businessman in a navy suit frowned, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. A young woman across the aisle shook her head, but she didn't speak. Marcus Reed kept his gaze steady, his hands folded on his lap. His calm seemed to irritate Karen even more. "Don't just sit there ignoring me," she snapped, her tone dripping with mockery. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or are you waiting for someone else to pay your way too?" A nervous laugh escaped from a man by the charging station, but it died quickly when Marcus turned his head in his direction, not in anger, just with a steady, unblinking calm that silenced him instantly. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "I told you. I belong here. My ticket says so. That's all you need to know." Karen let out a loud theatrical laugh. "Oh, please, don't insult me. I've seen enough to know when someone is lying. Why don't you do everyone a favor and leave before I call security? Save yourself the embarrassment." The word embarrassment echoed through the lounge. And yet, it wasn't Marcus who looked diminished. It was the woman whose voice trembled with fury, whose eyes darted, desperate for approval from the strangers watching. Marcus leaned back in his chair, saying nothing. His silence wasn't defeat. It was control. A soldier's control, honed in the silence between gunfire and the calm before a storm. But Karen mistook it for weakness. She tilted her chin higher, raising her voice so the entire lounge could hear, "Don't make me repeat myself. Get up. You don't belong here, and everyone knows it." The sting of her words wasn't just for Marcus. It spread outward, infecting the room with discomfort, with shame, with the uneasy truth of how quickly cruelty could command an audience. Phones were up now, filming. Dozens of eyes lingered on Marcus, waiting to see if he would finally break. But Marcus didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just sat, calm and unshaken, waiting for the moment when the truth would speak louder than any insult. Karen's voice rang louder now, her cheeks flushed with righteous indignation. Fine. If you won't move, I'll call security myself. She pulled her phone from her purse, waving it in the air as though the gesture alone proved her authority. The lounge buzzed with uneasy whispers. Travelers shifted in their seats, torn between discomfort and curiosity. A middle-aged man muttered under his breath, "This is getting out of hand." An attendant in a navy blazer hurried over, her badge gleaming beneath the lounge's soft lights. "Ma'am, sir, is there a problem here?" Karen pounced on the opportunity. "Yes, there is a problem. This man doesn't belong in the lounge. He's refusing to leave. I want him removed immediately." The attendant blinked, glancing at Marcus, who sat composed, his hands resting on his lap. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" she asked gently. Marcus nodded. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and produced it, holding it out with calm precision. Before the attendant could even take it, Karen snatched the slip from his hand. "Don't bother," she snapped, holding it high like evidence in a trial. She scanned the printout, then smirked. "See? Coach ticket. I knew it. He's lying." Gasps rippled through the lounge, but the attendant leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as she took the ticket back. She studied it for a moment longer, then looked up sharply. "Ma'am, you're mistaken. This is a first-class ticket." The smug smile fell from Karen's face. "What? That can't be right." "It is," the attendant said firmly, handing the ticket back to Marcus with both hands, a gesture of respect. "Sir, you're welcome here." A murmur of vindication stirred among the onlookers, but Karen wasn't ready to yield. Her lips thinned into a hard line. "First class or not, this is clearly some kind of mistake. People like him—" She stopped, realizing too late that her words had carried across the lounge. The silence that followed was sharp, suffocating. Every pair of eyes was now locked on her. And at that exact moment, Marcus shifted in his chair to stand, and his small carry-on tipped over. The zipper slid, the bag slumped to the carpet, and from it, a velvet case tumbled out, snapping open as it hit the floor. A row of medals gleamed beneath the lounge's fluorescent lights. The silence broke into gasps. Karen froze, and the entire room saw the truth she could no longer deny. The velvet case lay on the carpet, its lid wide open, its contents gleaming under the sterile lounge lights. For a moment, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Inside, carefully arranged, were medals that spoke volumes. A purple heart, dulled at the edges from years gone by, a silver star, polished to perfection, and at the center, a distinguished service cross, its ribbon crisp, its metal shining like captured fire. There were others too, ribbons of valor, decorations of service, a tapestry of sacrifice told in steel and silk. The crowd drew closer, their earlier whispers transforming into stunned silence. A businessman who had laughed moments earlier now covered his mouth, eyes wide. A young woman lowered her phone, her face flushing with shame, forever recording. Karen's lips parted, but no words came. Her face drained of color, her body stiff as if she had been frozen in place. The smugness, the superiority, gone, shattered by the weight of the truth lying at Marcus's feet. The attendant crouched slowly, as though handling something sacred. With careful hands, she lifted the case, her voice hushed but reverent. "Sir, these are yours?" Marcus bent down and took the case back, his hands steady, his movements precise. He closed it with a quiet snap and straightened, his calm presence filling the room. "Yes, they're mine." The lounge erupted in a soft chorus of gasps and murmurs. One man in a worn army cap stood abruptly and gave Marcus a sharp, silent salute. Another traveler whispered, "Distinguished Service Cross? That's one of the highest honors." Karen finally found her voice, but it came out weak, trembling. I didn't know," but the room no longer belonged to her. All eyes were fixed on Marcus Reed, the man she had tried to cast out, now revealed not just as a first-class passenger, but as a soldier who had borne the weight of battles none of them had faced. And in that moment, the power of truth outshone every insult she had hurled. The hush in the lounge gave way to a swell of voices, low at first, then rising with awe and shame intermingled. A young man near the charging station whispered, "That's the Silver Star. I've only ever seen those in books." A woman clasped her hands against her chest, her eyes glistening. "He fought for this country." The older veteran in the army cap stepped closer, standing tall. He raised his hand in a crisp salute, not playful, not casual, but the solemn gesture of one soldier honoring another. The room stilled again as others watched, some placing their hands over their hearts, others bowing their heads in quiet respect. Marcus returned the salute with measured dignity, then lowered his hand. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply stood, steady and composed. The medals once hidden now a silent witness to his sacrifice. Karen's face had turned ghostly pale. Her lips trembled as she took a small step back. She looked around for support, but every eye in the room had turned cold against her. The bystanders who had chuckled earlier now glared with disgust. The same phones that had filmed Marcus being mocked were now capturing her shame. The lounge attendant, still holding herself upright with visible reverence, handed the medal case back with both hands, as though returning something sacred. "Sir," she said softly, "on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your service." Marcus nodded, his deep voice calm. "I only did what was asked of me." But the words hit harder than if he had shouted. Humility wrapped around them, giving his presence more weight than any uniform could. Karen stumbled for words, her voice breaking. I didn't mean, I didn't know," but no one offered her rescue. In that moment, the power had shifted completely. The man she tried to humiliate had become the center of admiration, and she stood alone, exposed by her own cruelty. Marcus stood in the center of the lounge, medal case in his hand, his calm presence commanding more respect than any uniform ever could. The room was utterly still, the weight of shame pressing down on every bystander who had laughed, every phone that had recorded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I served this country for nearly 20 years, Marcus said evenly, his voice carrying with quiet strength. "I've worn the uniform on foreign soil, and I've seen good men and women fall beside me so that others could come home. These medals," he glanced down at the velvet case, "aren't decorations. They're reminders of sacrifice, of blood, of the lives we carry with us long after the fight is over." A murmur swept through the lounge, not of gossip, but of reverence. A few travelers wiped their eyes. The older veteran stood ramrod straight, saluting once more, this time joined by another man in the back who had silently risen to attention. Marcus looked around the room, meeting the eyes of strangers one by one. "I don't ask for special treatment. I don't need anyone's pity. All I ask for is respect. The same respect every human being deserves, no matter where they sit or what they look like." His words hit harder than any anger could have. They carried the weight of lived truth, of battles fought not just overseas, but here, in moments like this. Karen's shoulders hunched, her face tight with shame. The same lips that had hurled insults now struggled to form words. She whispered, I'm sorry." Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't lash out. He simply gave her a steady, unreadable look, then turned back to the attendant. "Thank you for treating me with dignity," he said, his tone softening. The attendant bowed her head. "It's the least you deserve." And for the first time since the confrontation began, the lounge was silent not from tension, but from respect. The tension that had gripped the lounge had dissolved into something else entirely: reverence. The once buzzing room was hushed, as if every traveler understood they had witnessed something far greater than a petty argument. Marcus Reed gave a small nod to the attendant, then carefully placed the velvet medal case back into his carry-on. He zipped it closed with the same quiet precision he had shown through the entire ordeal, as if sealing away not just medals, but memories too heavy to share. He turned toward his chair, his posture tall, his stride unhurried. As he sat again, the crowd seemed to part for him without being asked, their eyes following him with a mix of guilt and admiration. The businessman who had once smirked at Karen's insults now leaned forward and offered his hand. Thank you, sir. Truly, Marcus shook it firmly, but humbly, replying with the same words he always did. I was just doing my duty. The older veteran lowered his salute at last, his eyes shining. And you did it well, soldier. Around the lounge, quiet applause began to ripple. Hesitant at first, then stronger. Some clapped, others simply nodded. But the meaning was clear. Respect had been restored. Karen sat stiff in her chair, her face pale, her purse clutched tight to her chest. She whispered another apology, but this time no one listened. The same crowd that had once enabled her cruelty now looked past her, their focus fixed solely on the man she had tried to belittle. Marcus leaned back in his seat, folding his hands, his face calm once again. He didn't bask in the attention. He didn't need to. For him, dignity wasn't something granted by others. It was something carried within, unshakable, even under fire. The lounge slowly returned to its rhythm, but the atmosphere was forever changed. People spoke in softer tones, glanced at Marcus with quiet respect, and lowered their phones as if ashamed they had ever thought this was just entertainment. And as the boarding call echoed over the intercom, Marcus stood, lifted his bag, and walked toward the gate with the same quiet strength that had carried him through battlefields and, today, through prejudice. He hadn't demanded respect. He had earned it, once again.